everybody ready? You good? Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. My name is Carylann Assante, and I'm the Executive Director for the Student and Youth Travel Association. We're based outside of Washington, D.C., and really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you, especially during such a busy time. What I'm so very excited about is that 4 years ago, when I came to my first ITB and I started to walk around the hall, there was not a lot of members and not a lot of attendees that really understood the student group travel market, the school market. And it's very exciting that 4 years later, with a lot of good friends and with a major research study, that we have major organizations and great partners that are here today to talk about the unique characteristics of the school tour market. We've had terrific presenters earlier today talking about the trends in travel, the trends in the youth market. But I just want to make sure that we all have an understanding of what we're talking about in our session today. We're talking about the student and youth market that is somewhere between the ages of 10 and 18. 10 and 18. So it is not the individual student traveler 18 and over that can make the decisions for themselves. That's what makes this a unique market. It is a combination of a parent with the funds to travel, an educator or a teacher with a passion for travel and education and a desire to share it with students, finding the right tour operator partner who is going to provide a professional and safe environment for travel, and more importantly, supplier partners and destinations who care and want this business. And when I say want this business, because there was a day that a lot of times our colleagues did not want that 10-year-old running around the museum. They didn't want 15-year-olds hanging out in the lobbies of their hotels. There were a lot of unique challenges to this particular age group traveling. But today, what I'm very excited about, that we are very much an important part of this very growing, important global industry. What I also found out when coming here is that there was no research data on this particular market. How many of you have gone to your destination and said, how many student travelers are we getting to our city? How many student travelers under 18 are there? And that's because we were often not marketed and researched like other groups. And that's because travelers under 18, they don't even show up in airport data because the airports are only looking at passports of students 18 and older. So if you're a student group, they're only counting the group leader, not the number of students. And hotel colleagues were only counting the number of rooms and not the number of students in the room. They were counting the number of buses, but not that 50 students are on every bus. So it's very exciting today to share with you a research project we have worked with Samuel and his team. We have surveyed 3 important components of the North American student tour market. We surveyed teachers. For the very first time, teachers are going to share with us what is important to them as educators. We studied North American tour operators, and we talked with tour operators with inbound students to the United States. Now, this presentation isn't just about North America. We have colleagues here to talk about what, again, are the unique characteristics of the student tour groups and how you can benefit from having these younger students in your destinations and in your properties. So first, what I'd like to do is introduce my friend and colleague, Samuel, to share the research with us. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you for a very warm welcome. And I'll probably start with a line that was mentioned an hour ago, that we all believe that student and youth travel will have more recognition and visibility in the world? Well, I think SYTA has contributed one of the most, if not the most, to give a visibility to specifically to school group travel. Can we change the slide? There is a saying that if you have no data, you have no industry. What SYTA did, they conducted and commissioned a quite significant worldwide research over this segment to map it out and understand it better, as well as to provide an information base for those who want to make decisions. And we will be presenting this research now. It's the first of its kind. It was massive, took 3 years to do it, and you will see some major findings out of that research. Before I go there, let me give you a basic idea of this school group travel globally. It's now more than 5 million arrivals, and it's still growing and faster than the mainstream tourism. The junior, in between 10 to 18, as it has been mentioned by Carylann, is probably the best possible visitor for the destination. That visitor comes early when we consider the lifetime of the visitor, and has the highest likelihood to return for multiple times with the spouse, as a business traveler, experiential traveler, etc. Also, it's an easy target marketing-wise because these travelers come in groups. So they are pre-organized, they are controllable, manageable. It's so-called sustainable visitor for destinations. We know that some destinations are reaching their cap for the balance in between the local citizens and the visitors, and they are not interested in any kind of visitor, but a sustainable visitor. And juniors in between 10 to 18 who come on a school trip in a group, managed, supervised, for the content, spend the time and money outside of the bus, in multiple locations, be it restaurant, museum, or local experience with cooking or language course. This is a sort of almost ideal visitor for a destination. So who are they by definition? Student group trip is a journey undertaken by a group of at least 2 non-related people, usually classmates or peers, traveling out of their local area or day-to-day trip environment of on the same times and following the same itinerary. Quite a long, complicated, but only possible definition. Such groups are often led and pre-organized by a teacher or a group leader or band leader, and largely to enrich their in-class or training experience. So school trips is to enrich the formal experience with an informal setting. So by experiencing or performing, visiting new environment with a new experience or observation or relaxation. So the extracurricular groups fall under this definition too. Examples would be school trips, marching bands, orchestras, drama clubs, church groups, sport teams, fraternities, special needs groups. The research we have done, it was a B2B research. So we were interviewing tour operators who facilitate the overseas or local domestic trips for these school trips, or teachers. And we got 2,143 responses, representing 1.1 million students that take the trips. So it was the latest and robust B2B insight into student travel in the United States, so US domestic mobility of students in between the cities or states, as well as outbound, so American students traveling abroad outside of the United States, as well as inbound. So all the young travelers in the age of 10 to 18 that travel to the United States. We had the data from tour operators worldwide, So not only from the United States, we distributed a survey to 16,000 active existing student tour operators and US teachers and group leaders. So these kind of data was quite representative because we had almost all relevant countries included and all US states represented in the research. So what are the top 10 destinations when it comes to demand of this target group of school trippers? UK is the #1 destination for student group travel, closely followed by the United States. Surprisingly, Canada, France, Italy, and Germany, so the European destinations. And then Australia made it to top 10, followed by Spain, China, mostly inter-regional travel, and New Zealand. So perhaps you might not find many surprises who made it to top 10, but you might be surprised by the order that is taken by particular destinations, and it's mostly because those destinations work with this segment to prepare the content and marketing campaigns to target them. So inbound student travel to the United States, as reported by student tour operators, so those who are sending students to the United States. So 15% of those trips are for leisure only. And as we can see, 85% of those trips have educational content. So they are either tied to curriculum of students or related to, let's say, to their class, historic, sightseeing, and similar curriculum purposes. Majority of those we cannot afford a too detailed breakdown, but majority of those are to learn a language in a new environment, be it French, English, Spanish, in practice. So they do the sightseeing as well as they do some language classes. What are the top 10 destinations? So when it comes to students coming to the United States, so New York is the #1, and most of the students coming, or many students coming through New York. So as you can see, the bubble is the biggest, sitting on New York. So it's not only the first, but quite predominant altogether with Boston and Los Angeles. So you can see those three cities have the biggest bubble, and the other 7 destinations out of top 10 follow. So Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Miami, Chicago, Orlando, San Diego, and Philadelphia. Now, U.S. students, as reported by U.S. teachers, so how do U.S. students travel internationally? So where do they go? 4% to Canada, we expected more. 18% to Latin America, and 2/3 to Europe. So 66% trips from the United States are aiming to land in Europe. Let's also share something about the social impact. So as Secretary General of United Nations World Tourism Organization mentioned it in the opening keynote for this Youth Travel Summit some hour and a half ago. It's not only important what is the economic impact, but also social impact of student travelers to the destination. So basically, in a nutshell, when students travel, they become better citizens, and better behaving individuals, whether it comes to their education or their career. So 56% travel has a very positive impact on students' education and career. Namely, 73% have noticed increased willingness to know and learn and explore after they made an international trip. 71% cases led to higher desire for future travel. So one travel increases appetite for another one. A trip. 68% increase independence, self-esteem, and confidence. So the other day I had a question from Metropole, who is the radio show in America with 9.5 million listeners. So how do these trips contribute to individual professional development? And here we can see the 68% are more independent and more confident individuals. 64% help become more intellectually curious. So they want to know more in class, not only learning through experience through traveling. And 58% help become more cooperative and tolerant of other cultures. So it contributes to world peace, it contributes to rather building bridges than walls, and it contributes to sort of a better world. So it's the social impact of the student travel is enormous, and it is happening in early stage of life. So this can be carried for next, let's say, 70 years or so. What are, on the other side, the barriers of travels for student travelers and organizers of school trips? Well, by far, it's the access to financial resources. So the kids who want to travel, or the teachers that organize these travels, or tour operators might not necessarily have enough access to financial resources of their desire. So the mismatch in between the desire to travel and access to financial resources is quite large. And this is something that shows a lot about how huge the demand is, that 44% cannot travel because of the finances, but they would like to. There are some administrative rules and limitations. This may include some visa difficulties to particular countries and some kind of risk management that the destination might not necessarily offer a safe environment for travel. And there we have some other minor challenges and barriers to travel. What are the current trends and happenings? So we have external challenges to student group travel. Like it was mentioned previously, be it visas, currency exchanges, terrorist attacks that might not necessarily encourage us or our groups to travel more, and sort of bring us to uncertainty to leave our own home base. Then what are the recognized global resources for getting information that tour operators and teachers need? So we will be discussing this through the panel, so no need to spend time on this now. And then we need to have more understanding and implementation of a crisis management plan. So this is something when we work with juniors, we need to be very sensitive about planning and having a backup plan and a crisis management plan. And then, as I mentioned, the impact of exchange rates. I would leave it here as a basic food for thoughts and the takeaways, and also as a feeder for our panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. And a question we often receive is the actual research study, the Student and Youth Travel Digest, will be released publicly in June, but we're working on a campaign to get that information out to you. And a lot of the actual data, again, will be available in June at the end of this year. It's interesting, the last comment that just came up was exchange rates. And Anders talked about how maybe the US is a more expensive destination, but hopefully, with the exchange rate, we'll see more business from the United States and Canada coming into Europe. I know Mike Clark with ECE Travel works with a number of US-based or North American student groups, and I've asked Mike to give you maybe an overview and a characteristic of what a typical US group is looking for in this junior market, and then how maybe some of our partners might be able to work with that group with you.
Yeah, thanks, Carylann. Can I just say before I start, Samuel, having worked many, many years in this industry, that's one of the most insightful pieces of research I've seen for a long time. It really puts it into perspective, and this industry sector has been looking for that for a long time. So well done, and thanks to SYTA for sponsoring it. I should say that because I'm also a SYTA board director, but but also as a tour operator, it's highly insightful. So what are North American groups looking for? Well, I don't think you can generalize just like that, because if you're handling religious groups, if you're handling sports groups, if you're handling educational and cultural groups, even geography plays a very important part. Parts of the states where kids come from will all have an impact. Fundamentally, I think the students are looking for experiences outside their comfort zone that they've had in their own country. They're looking to have fun. The parents, however, are looking for maybe a few different things, like, and I'll probably generalize and say CV enhancement. The world is becoming a far more competitive place, and I think parents particularly realize that through international travel, their children gain a greater insight. I was recently had the privilege to handle a group of American educators, and the biggest thing they talked about was equipping their students with the toolkit to enable those students to compete on the global, in the global market in future. So international travel, internationalization, I think is a major part of it. Some students who are on international baccalaureate programs will want to get involved in service projects because it's part of the curricula. Curricula plays an important part of how you put a program together, but it's actually how you make it more meaningful. And we like to think that we can teach English history by taking over a well-known castle during the summer months, and Edward comes up in his all his regalia, and the students get to understand English history through actually experiencing it in the grounds of Warwick Castle. Just one example. So I think there's lots of dimensions, but fundamentally, teachers are looking for specific criteria, and they're looking for their students to become educated. Cultural immersion is a great part of it, meeting kids from different parts of the world, and indeed making lifelong friendships in many instances.
That's great. And just to follow up on what Mike was just sharing, with many U.S. student groups, teachers have to take core standards of learning and curriculum and actually match it to the tour itinerary. So they're actually literally sitting with their curriculum and having to justify that trip. So the more information that you can share with your tour operator about how your destination, your attraction, your museum, your product might serve educational needs is really helpful. Now I know, Christian, with Ardmore Travel, you work with a lot of European school groups. Can you share with our colleagues here how you're working with partners, or maybe selecting partners to provide parts of your tour itineraries?
Sure. So thanks very much for inviting me as well. What we really look for is someone who is open to taking school groups, and by that I mean some things that are super important for us are free place ratios for teachers. We like to have accurate staffing ratios because they will always travel with at least, most of our groups, 1 to 10 students. So that's something that's important for us. It's really important as well that the suppliers we use, let's take hotels for example, understand that we're looking to have sort of no frills in there. So we're looking to get as many bodies as possible, as far as safely possible of course, in the rooms, which can provide a great return for you guys as hoteliers. So that's kind of something we're looking for when it comes to hotels and accommodation, some suppliers that understand exactly what we need. We talked about this before. It's not necessarily the most, it's not going to provide the most revenue, student groups, but it does come at times of year which really help yourselves as well as suppliers. It's usually complementary on the fringes of the summer and maybe winter business if you're in ski, for example. So that's what we...
That's great. And again, can't emphasize the value of those kinds of groups with pre and post peak times. I know certainly Teresa with Destination DC, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you work with student groups when they all want to come during cherry blossoms and there's not a single hotel room to be found.
Right. Thank you again also for having me here. Just a little bit of background with Washington, D.C., as everybody in the room probably knows, the city itself. Our city actually is a very small city. We're only 15 square kilometers around, and we see about 19 million visitors, and out of that, well over 1 million of those are our student market. And so student market is very, very high regarded in Washington, D.C., so we kind of take the approach in two separate ways. One of them obviously is from a sales perspective, because we want the market to keep coming back from a domestic but also an international perspective, but also a services angle that we're looking at. And so we do it from a number of different angles. Obviously, core curriculum, this is no better place in America to meet the core curriculum. The students are always coming for whatever it is, their 8th grade trip. And so we do have a lot of challenges because they're all coming during their spring break, which is also over the same time when we have this little festival called the National Cherry Blossom Festival, where over 2 million people come into the city outside the student groups to come in and watch for 2 weeks these cherry blossoms bloom. And when you only have 15 kilometers of to work with and over 3,300 buses on a daily basis that come through over that time period, it does create some challenges. And so services is a really big area that we focus on. And we approached this a couple of years ago of working with our American Bus Association, our Department of Transportation, and then also looking from a tourism perspective to communicate out to the tour operators on what's the best way to navigate through our city. The wonderful thing that we love about our international visitors is they love to get off the bus and walk. Unfortunately, American travelers are a little bit different. They love to be escorted from place to place, and you know, they're a little bit less free in order to do things, obviously, for a million different reasons. And so we spend a lot of time on a quarterly basis doing webinars with our tour operators to tell them how to navigate through the city, helping with new curriculum, because you know, doing the same Smithsonian museums the same time over and over again is great, but I think all of us are starting to see, and obviously the panel before, this younger generation wants to touch and feel and experience things, and being walked around by a curator all the time or driving by something is a little bit different. And so our team really helps the operator expand what their itinerary is going to be and have a better experience in the city.
That's great. When we talked about those motor coach buses, I know that it's really important for tour operators to be working with destinations and partners on managing large number of students trying to getting around cities. Ura, I know that with Welcome Berlin, you have been working in the student market for a very long time and have some great relationships with the teachers that you work with and certainly educators. Can you speak to the decision process for how teachers working with you are, number one, making their decisions about when to travel, maybe number two, how, you know, is it a long lead time, is it a short lead time, and maybe number three, are they covering multiple destinations or trying to accomplish a whole lot in a short period of time?
Thank you also to having me here. And yeah, first question: how's the decision process? Yes, it's completely different. It's sometimes we need short times if they prepare school travel, but I can speak especially about the German market. If they plan normally if they plan a school travel, then they start in September time after the summer holiday. Then they start to speak with the parents and to plan all the things and all the things what they need from us. Is also a completely itinerary, also a curriculum, and also if a German teacher will plan a school travel, he needs a curriculum, what he will do with the students. When the most reason is for doing school tours, it's also they do have educational reasons. And normally it's a long time. They start in September and they travel in next year, and beginning from March, also in winter time. It depends on which subjects they are doing in the school. We have completely different products. And an example, we are offering skiing travel. Then they are going to the Alps. Then they prepare the trips not after the summer holidays, before the summer holidays. Normally half year or 1 year before. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Great. And I think that we also found in this study that they can be booking as short as 3 months, but typically, definitely in the North American market, they're potentially working 18 months out, and a lot of that has to do with fundraising. A lot of times the students for their trips have to fundraise for half the funds. So there's a relatively long lead time for certainly outbound business from the United States. Mike, we've talked a little bit earlier about the growth in the Asian market and the Chinese student market. And I actually talked to a Chinese parent, and they were more concerned that their student not visit the fun attractions that might be available, but that the Chinese student is even more focused on curriculum, technology, and science. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your experience with the Chinese student market.
It's challenging. Don't provide blankets. It's got to be duvets because, we don't understand them. We're very fortunate that we've worked with agents that we've developed relationships with. There is a lot of pressure to deliver to an Asian standard, whereas to get the real benefits out of an international trip, you need to be culturally immersed, you need to get involved. And if I just give you one example of a homestay in an inner city in London, or in a suburb of London, and seeing some Chinese students going to homestay with fear, frankly, and 3 days later coming out of that homestay and crying because of the relationships they've created. So I don't think it's about managing the status quo, but I think the challenge with international student travel is about experiencing the difference. And we have problems in certain parts. For example, in France, if children go into a family and the parents serve wine with the meal, that may not be considered terribly appropriate in certain parts of the world, and especially in certain southern states, but it is part of the culture. And I think to take away that culture, that cultural experience, isn't right, but I do think you have to be aware of it and you have to plan for it, and as a result of which, practice makes perfect.
That's great. Christian, I noticed on your website that you are sending students to Asian destinations, to South Africa, Sri Lanka, really unique destinations, and just talking about the age of students and tying it to curriculum. Can you talk about potentially the different purposes of those trips and taking them outbound, and what those student groups are looking for in some of these unique destinations?
Okay, so Ardmore Educational Travel's got 30 years history of being a language and cultural specialist. We're seeing more of a move towards this global citizenship idea. So a lot of schools now, especially the top schools in the UK, if I refer to them, are looking at multiple trips. Lots of parents have to make a decision between doing the French exchange and the ski trip, or perhaps doing the Ghana service learning program. Those kind of programs also help students with their college applications, so that also adds another dimension to it. So I think the older students now, we're seeing a lot of parents saving a little bit more and maybe pushing them at 16, 18 onto the service learning programs. It doesn't take away from the younger students doing the language and cultural, but that's certainly a new dimension for the reasons just mentioned about the personal statements and college applications, certainly.
Yeah, we've seen certainly a shift from the typical spring break type vacation to much more of a cultural experience. We're even seeing a shift in the States to gap year programs. Traditionally, our students went straight to college, and now they're taking a year off, and they're looking for those unique experiences that can be found worldwide. Teresa, I know that we've talked quite a bit about inbound into Washington, D.C. and providing some of the unique opportunities with that language component, potentially working with universities to provide some additional types of housing. Can you talk a little bit about how you're making those relationships work with all your partners?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Number one is China is actually now our #1 inbound market. As of 2 years ago, it surpassed the UK in 2014. And the student travel market for China alone, and I won't just segregate China, but it's because it's the fastest growing, and we've had to make a lot of adjustments, and it's been a great learning experience for us. But we're seeing it from the Middle East and also with Brazil as well, with a lot of the student market, is that the students are coming over now for 2 weeks, at least over to I won't even say Washington, D.C., to the United States, and they want to do the entire country in 2 weeks. And so depending on what their core is, they usually come over for a week and do their school study, and then a week is whatever their vacation travel is going to be. And so depending on what coast they go and what time of year that they're coming, the summer is usually that curriculum. Spring Festival for the Chinese is a little bit different as well as with October. But we work so close. We have over 11 colleges and universities that are actually, these students that are coming over are their future students that are going to be at their colleges and universities. And so we have developed a program with our local colleges and university on, the on-campus experience that they need to have when they're there, and then marrying with our hotel stays afterwards for the experience that they're going to have, because they're trying to rotate students all through the school. And a lot of times on the international side, the way Americans see it is that not only are the students coming over to experience whatever, they're studying their language or they're practicing their English when they're over here during that time period, but this could be a potential school for them to be going to, because they do primary where they are and then obviously university over in America. And so we've worked such a great relationship, and it's been very successful. We work with a lot of the education agencies in each one of these countries to really educate them on what kind of programs that we have.
That's great. This sort of college pre-admissions travel, I think, is growing worldwide. Parents are certainly investing a lot more in their students, and we have definitely found that many of them are coming to North America with the hope of coming back for college. I think, Ur, earlier we were talking about, and even Sam, you had on the screen, the events that happened in the fall, terrorism, certainly those things impact our market, especially when you're dealing with the younger student market. And it's really important to have access to the appropriate organizations and information to ensure that travelers are going to be safe. Schools today and education organizations are very invested in reassuring parents and school boards that their kids are going to be safe, and more importantly, there's a crisis management plan in place, and I can't stress that enough. I know that we talked about, you're a member of Risenettes, and there are organizations that are really looking at student travel safety. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those requirements are and what you're looking for in the partners that you work for in this idea of safety and risk management?
Yeah, if you work in Germany as a youth tour operator, and also especially as a tour operator, you don't need any special licenses. We Germans are very bureaucratic, yeah, and that's not only the licenses what we need, but we are very sure that we can offer a lot of safety. And as a member of Risenettes, we are part of a different segment of Risenettes. We do have in our association, we have 5 different segments of suppliers. We have one segment is school travel, one is youth travel, it's more for holiday, and the third one is the coach travel, coach companies and program suppliers. And yeah, I'm not sure what are the 5. We have 5 different segments, but I'm mostly specialized in school travel, but I am also a member of the quality board of Risenettes, especially for school travel. Yeah, if you will offer in Germany school travel, you have to offer a lot of safety, and we have to take care about a crisis plan, and we will check it if every our members can offer this, and also every of our members has it's necessary to have an insurance against bank insolvent, and also special license for coaches. If you know, our company, we don't have own coaches, but we do need a special coach license. But this license gives our customers a safety that we know how it works, that we know how are the regulations about the times for the coach drivers and all the things, and all the things we are looking on the Reisenetz for more suppliers. And if you will be a member of Reisenetz, you have to accept our quality standards. Yeah.
Great. And there are a number of organizations. I know also in England there's the National School Forum. Mike, I know that you're a part of that organization as well.
Yeah, in the UK, I think we have a very strong association, the School Travel Forum, based on most of the major operators coming together and working in an industry where risk management is very, very strong. And as a result of which, there's an investment that goes into it. But I just did want to pick up specifically after Paris and talk about how SYTA with the European Tour Operators Association actually worked very, very closely together to be able to get some consistent messages back, particularly to the States, about the impacts of Paris and what was actually happening on the ground at the time. It was very important. I think as an industry, there are things that we can do, but we also must rely on key figureheads, and I'm talking largely about politicians who have actually got to say it's business as usual, we won't take risks, but you're safe still to travel. And that's important that message gets across.
Absolutely, and I think that's how we're all working together so that we don't lose business and we can continue to move forward. Sam, I was trying to figure out, you're not easily to stump, with all the research and the data and the work that you do. Were there any real ahas or takeaways that you saw that came out of the research that we did? I mean, again, we talked about the fact that we don't usually research teachers who travel. And just as a note, I've sort of anecdotally, we see that about 35% of the market is through tour operators, but educators and teachers are very often planning their own trips. So our goal is to move them to use tour operators, and I think life will be a lot easier. But just wanted to give you a little time, Sam. Was there anything that came out of the study that was really a surprise potentially to you? And then we'll wrap up.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, from the researchers and numbers point of view, the aha, wow effect was that how massive impact it has on students' lives and how huge opportunity it can be for a destination. So when we measured the economic impact of the multiple visits for the destinations later on, or how long students already stay in a destination, that it surprised me. As I started, I probably finish. If you have data, you have industry. And 2 years ago, we only had guesstimates, and we only had thoughts and ideas how impactful it might be. But now we know and how impactful it is, and it's the impact, both social and economic, is greater than we thought.
Well, that's great to hear. Again, I just want to thank everybody on our panel. It was great to spend the afternoon with you, and especially want to thank all of you for coming this afternoon. We'll spend a few minutes to the side here if any of you have any follow-up questions. So thank you again, and have a great afternoon.